In a quiet little town where everyone knew each other, life at Lincoln High School seemed ordinary on the surface. The school was known for its friendly teachers, sprawling green fields, and students who always greeted one another with smiles. But beneath this cheerful exterior lay a darker reality that many tried to ignore: bullying. It wasn't just teasing or harmless jokes. It was cruel, relentless, and often left victims feeling powerless. Among the students was Emily Carter, a bright 15-year-old girl who had been confined to a wheelchair after a car accident 2 years earlier. Despite her physical limitations, Emily remained determined to live life fully. She excelled in her studies, loved reading novels during lunch breaks, and even joined the school's art club. Her resilience inspired those around her, but it also made her an easy target for bullies. Some kids whispered behind her back, calling her names like cripple, or mocking how slowly she moved through the crowded hallways. Others deliberately tripped over her wheelchair, pretending it was an accident. Yet Emily never let them see her cry. She believed that ignoring their cruelty was the best way to handle it. But not everyone saw things the same way. Jake Miller, a tall, muscular senior with a reputation for being mean, led a group of boys notorious for picking on weaker students. They called themselves the Crew, though most people simply referred to them as troublemakers. Jake thrived on making others feel small. It gave him a twisted sense of power. He didn't care about consequences because no teacher ever punished him harshly enough to stop his behavior. His friends followed his lead, laughing at his jokes and joining in whenever he decided to humiliate someone new. One fateful afternoon, disaster struck. As Emily wheeled herself down the busy hallway toward her locker, Jake and his gang spotted her from across the corridor. Smirking, they exchanged glances before heading straight toward her. Without warning, they pushed past her roughly, knocking her books out of her lap. Papers scattered everywhere, sliding under benches and lockers. Before Emily could react, one of the boys shoved her wheelchair hard from behind, sending her crashing into the wall. The hallway fell eerily silent except for the sound of fluttering pages and the metallic clink of her wheelchair hitting the tiled floor. Emily sat there stunned, her heart pounding in her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes as pain shot through her arms from trying to brace herself against the impact. Around her, students froze mid-step, unsure of what to do. Some looked away awkwardly, pretending nothing had happened. Others snickered nervously, too afraid to intervene. Only a few dared to approach Emily, offering hesitant words of comfort while helping her pick up her belongings. But deep inside, anger simmered, not just within Emily but among those who witnessed the incident. Why did Jake always get away with such cruelty? Why didn't anyone stand up to him? Unbeknownst to everyone, this moment would set off a chain reaction that would change the school forever. Among the crowd stood Maya Johnson, a new student who had transferred to Lincoln High just a few weeks ago. Maya was unlike anyone else at the school. She was confident, outspoken, and fiercely protective of anyone treated unfairly. Growing up in a tough neighborhood had taught her how to stand her ground, both physically and mentally. When she heard whispers about what happened to Emily, something inside her snapped. No one deserved to be treated like that, especially not someone as kind and brave as Emily. Maya clenched her fists tightly, her jaw tightening as she watched Jake and his friends walk away, laughing as if nothing serious had occurred. For a brief moment, she considered letting it slide. After all, she was new here, and getting involved might make her a target too. But then she remembered her grandmother's words. If you see something wrong, don't wait for someone else to fix it. Be the one to step up. Those words echoed in her mind, fueling her resolve. If no one else was going to confront Jake, then she would. Little did anyone know Maya's decision to act would ignite a firestorm that would shake the very foundation of Lincoln High. Over the next 30 minutes, tension simmered beneath the surface, building toward a confrontation that no one would forget anytime soon. What started as a cruel prank by a bully would soon become a defining moment for the entire school, a turning point that would force everyone to choose sides and decide what kind of community they wanted to be part of. As Maya prepared herself mentally for what lay ahead, she couldn't help but notice the fear in the eyes of her classmates. Fear of Jake, fear of retaliation, and fear of standing out. But Maya wasn't afraid. She had faced worse growing up, and she knew that sometimes bravery meant doing the right thing even when everyone else stayed silent. With determination burning in her chest, she took a deep breath and headed toward the cafeteria, where Jake and his gang were sitting comfortably, oblivious to the storm about to hit them. The stage was set for a showdown that would leave an indelible mark on Lincoln High and prove once and for all that courage could come from the most unexpected places. The cafeteria buzzed with its usual lunchtime energy, students chatting loudly, trays clinking against tables, and the faint aroma of greasy fries filling the air. But today, an uneasy tension lingered beneath the surface. News of what had happened to Emily spread like wildfire, passed along in hushed whispers and furtive glances. Everyone seemed to know about the incident in the hallway, how Jake and his gang had knocked over Emily's wheelchair, leaving her humiliated and hurt. Some students expressed outrage while others shrugged it off as just another prank. Yet, despite the chatter, no one dared to confront Jake directly. At the center of it all sat Jake Miller and his crew, oblivious to the storm brewing around them. They occupied their usual spot near the windows, a prime location where they could survey the entire cafeteria like kings on a throne. Jake leaned back in his chair, laughing loudly at some crude joke one of his friends had made. His confidence was unshaken. He didn't seem bothered by the disapproving stares or the murmurs that followed him wherever he went. To him, this was just another day at Lincoln High, a place where he held all the power. But then something unexpected happened. The double doors of the cafeteria swung open with a loud bang, drawing everyone's attention. Standing there was Maya Johnson, her tall frame silhouetted against the bright light streaming in from outside. Her braids were tied neatly at the back of her head, and her dark eyes scanned the room with fierce determination. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates, and even the clatter of dishes faded into silence. All eyes turned to Maya as she marched forward, her footsteps echoing through the stillness. Maya's gaze locked onto Jake, who sat smirking at his table. Without hesitation, she strode straight toward him, her expression unwavering. As she approached, Jake finally noticed her presence. His smirk widened, amused by the audacity of this new girl walking up to him like she owned the place. "What do you want?" he asked lazily, leaning back further in his chair. His tone dripped with mockery, but Maya didn't flinch. "I want you to apologize," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. A ripple of shock ran through the crowd. No one had ever spoken to Jake like that before, at least not without facing severe consequences. Even Jake looked taken aback for a split second, though he quickly masked his surprise with a sneer. "Apologize for what?" he shot back, feigning innocence. His friends snickered, egging him on as if this were just another game. But Maya wasn't playing. She planted her feet firmly on the ground, standing tall despite being surrounded by Jake's intimidating gang. "You know exactly what I'm talking about," she replied, her voice rising slightly. "You think it's funny to pick on someone who can't fight back? You think it makes you tough to shove a girl in a wheelchair into a wall?" Her words hit like a punch, silencing the few remaining chuckles in the room. For the first time, Jake's cocky demeanor faltered. He glanced around the cafeteria, noticing the sea of faces watching intently. Some students nodded in agreement, emboldened by Maya's courage. Others shifted uncomfortably, torn between fear of Jake and admiration for Maya. The balance of power, which had always tilted in Jake's favor, suddenly felt uncertain. Jake tried to brush it off. "It was just a joke," he muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. She probably deserved it anyway. That comment ignited a spark within Maya. How dare he dismiss Emily's pain so casually? How dare he act like his actions were harmless? Anger surged through her veins, but she kept her composure. Instead of yelling, she took a step closer, her piercing gaze locking onto his. "Deserved it?" she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. "You honestly believe that? What did she do to deserve being humiliated in front of everyone? What did she do to deserve getting hurt because of your so-called jokes?" Jake shifted uncomfortably under her glare. For once, he didn't have a quick comeback. Sensing weakness, Maya pressed on. If you're such a big man, why don't you pick on someone your own size? Or better yet, why don't you admit that you're nothing but a coward hiding behind your friends? The cafeteria erupted into murmurs. Some students cheered quietly, thrilled to see Jake finally being called out. Others exchanged nervous glances, worried about what might happen next. Jake's face flushed red, partly from embarrassment and partly from anger. He stood up abruptly, towering over Maya. His height gave him an imposing presence, but Maya didn't back down. She stood her ground, meeting his glare with equal intensity. "What did you just call me?" Jake growled, his voice low and threatening. His friends tensed, ready to jump in if things escalated. But Maya wasn't afraid. Growing up in a rough neighborhood had taught her how to handle bullies like Jake. She knew that showing fear only encouraged them to push harder. "I called you a coward," she repeated calmly, enunciating each word clearly. "And if you've got a problem with that, maybe you should prove me wrong." For a moment it seemed like Jake might actually listen. There was a flicker of doubt in his eyes, a hint of vulnerability beneath his tough exterior. But pride quickly took over. With a growl, he lunged forward, attempting to grab Maya's arm. It was a reckless move, one born out of frustration rather than strategy. Maya saw it coming and sidestepped effortlessly, using his momentum against him. In one fluid motion, she twisted his arm behind his back and shoved him face first onto the table, scattering lunch trays and spilling drinks everywhere. Gasps filled the cafeteria as Jake struggled to break free, but Maya held firm. "Apologize to Emily," she commanded, her voice ringing out like a battle cry. Jake hesitated, glaring at her with pure hatred. But when he saw the hundreds of eyes watching him, waiting for his response, he finally muttered a reluctant apology under his breath. Satisfied for now, Maya released him and stepped back, turning to address the rest of the room. "And if any of you see something like this again, don't just stand there like cowards," she shouted, her voice echoing off the walls. "Do something. Speak up. Stand together. Because we're stronger when we support each other." Her words sent a wave of inspiration rippling through the crowd. Students exchanged looks of awe and admiration, realizing that Maya was right. Change wouldn't come from staying silent. It would come from taking action. And for the first time in a long time, the students of Lincoln High began to feel a glimmer of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. As Maya walked away from Jake's table, the cafeteria erupted into applause. Some students even stood up, cheering loudly for the brave girl who had stood up to the school's biggest bully. Jake slunk back into his seat, humiliated and defeated, while his friends avoided eye contact, unsure of what to say. The dynamics of Lincoln High had shifted in an instant, all because one person decided to take a stand. But Maya knew this was only the beginning. Confronting Jake was just the first step. If real change was going to happen, the entire school needed to wake up and realize that bullying couldn't be tolerated anymore. And as she looked around the room, seeing the mix of admiration and uncertainty on her classmates' faces, she realized that the hardest work was yet to come. The aftermath of the cafeteria showdown rippled through Lincoln High like a tidal wave. News of what happened spread beyond the walls of the school, reaching parents, teachers, and even local news outlets. For days, it was the only thing anyone could talk about. Students dissected every detail during class breaks. Parents grilled their kids about the incident at home, and social media buzzed with hashtags like "Guy Stand with Maya" and "No to Bullying." It seemed that Maya's bold confrontation had struck a nerve, forcing everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about the culture of bullying that had long plagued the school. Principal Thompson, a kind but often indecisive man, found himself under immense pressure to address the situation. He called an emergency assembly 2 days after the incident, standing nervously behind the podium in the gymnasium as hundreds of students filed in, whispering excitedly. The atmosphere was electric. Everyone wanted to hear what he would say. Would Jake be expelled? Would there be new rules to prevent future incidents? Or would this just be another empty promise to sweep the problem under the rug? When the room finally settled into silence, Principal Thompson cleared his throat and began. "What happened earlier this week was unacceptable," he said, his voice firm but tinged with regret. "We pride ourselves on fostering a safe and supportive environment here at Lincoln High, but clearly we have fallen short." His words earned nods of agreement from some students, though others rolled their eyes, skeptical of yet another speech filled with vague promises. He went on to announce stricter anti-bullying measures, including mandatory workshops for both students and staff, anonymous reporting systems for victims, and counseling sessions for those affected by bullying. Most notably, Jake and his gang were suspended for 2 weeks, a decision that sent shockwaves through the school. While some cheered the punishment as overdue justice, others whispered that it wasn't enough. After all, suspensions wouldn't erase years of toxic behavior overnight. But the real change didn't come from the administration. It came from the students themselves. Inspired by Maya's courage, several classmates decided to take matters into their own hands. A group of Vice seniors formed a peer support network called Voices United, aimed at helping victims of bullying find strength and solidarity. They set up a booth near the main entrance, handing out flyers and inviting students to share their stories anonymously. To everyone's surprise, dozens of notes poured in within the first few hours, some recounting painful memories of being teased or excluded, others expressing gratitude for finally having a platform to speak out. Emily Carter became one of the most active members of Voices United. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she wanted to relive the humiliation of that day in the hallway. But Maya encouraged her, reminding her that sharing her story could inspire others to do the same. Slowly, Emily began opening up, speaking candidly about how the bullying had affected her self-esteem and made her feel invisible. Her honesty resonated deeply with her peers, many of whom admitted they had no idea how much she struggled behind her cheerful exterior. As more students joined the movement, the once divided cliques of Lincoln High started to blur. Athletes sat alongside art club members at lunch, discussing ways to promote kindness. Popular girls who once mocked quieter classmates now volunteered to mentor freshmen. Even teachers noticed the shift, commenting on how classrooms felt less tense and more collaborative. The transformation wasn't immediate, nor was it perfect, but it was undeniable. For Maya, however, things weren't so simple. While many admired her for standing up to Jake, she also faced backlash from unexpected corners. Some students accused her of being too aggressive, claiming she should have handled the situation differently. Others whispered behind her back, calling her names like angry black girl, or questioning why she had to make everything about race. These comments stung, not because they were true, but because they revealed how deeply ingrained prejudice still was in the school. At first, Maya tried to brush off the negativity. She reminded herself that people resistant to change often lashed out when confronted with uncomfortable truths. But as the criticism mounted, it began to weigh on her. Late one evening, sitting alone in her bedroom, she stared at her reflection in the mirror, replaying the hurtful words in her mind. Was she wrong to fight back? Should she have stayed quiet and let things play out differently? Her grandmother's voice echoed in her thoughts. "They'll try to break you, sweetheart. Don't let them." Taking a deep breath, Maya straightened her posture and looked herself in the eye. She knew she couldn't please everyone, and she shouldn't have to. Real change always came with resistance, and she was willing to endure it if it meant making the world a better place. Even if it was just one school at a time. Determined to rise above the negativity, Maya threw herself into her work with Voices United. She organized workshops on empathy and conflict resolution, invited guest speakers to discuss mental health awareness, and led discussions about privilege and inclusion. Her passion inspired others to step up, creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond the walls of Lincoln High. Parents praised her leadership skills, while teachers marveled at her ability to unite such diverse groups of students. Yet despite the accolades, Maya remained humble, always reminding others that heroism wasn't about grand gestures. It was about doing what was right, even when it was hard. Meanwhile, Jake Miller's suspension ended quietly 2 weeks later. When he returned to school, he kept mostly to himself, avoiding eye contact and steering clear of trouble. Gone was the swaggering confidence that once defined him. Instead, he walked with his head down, seemingly lost in thought. Rumors swirled about whether Maya's intervention had truly changed him, or if he was simply biding his time until he could strike again. Only Jake knew the truth. That moment in the cafeteria had shaken him to his core. For the first time in his life, he saw himself through someone else's eyes. A bully, a coward, a person unworthy of respect. It wasn't a pleasant realization, but it was necessary. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Jake began to change. He stopped laughing at cruel jokes and distanced himself from his old friends. Occasionally, he'd apologize to someone he'd wronged. In the past, though his words were hesitant and awkward, some dismissed these efforts as insincere, but others noticed genuine remorse in his actions. Perhaps Maya hadn't just humbled him, she had awakened something dormant within him, forcing him to confront the person he had become. By the end of the semester, the culture of Lincoln High had shifted dramatically. The hallways buzzed with positivity, laughter replaced whispers, and friendships blossomed across boundaries that had once seemed insurmountable. It was proof that one person's courage could indeed inspire a community to rise above its flaws. And though challenges remained, the students of Lincoln High now faced them together, with hope, resilience, and an unshakable belief in the power of unity. Through it all, Maya stood as a beacon of strength and determination. Her journey was far from over, but she had already accomplished something extraordinary. She had shown everyone that standing up to injustice wasn't just an act of defiance, it was an act of love. Love for herself, for her peers, and for the future they were building together. As the weeks turned into months, Lincoln High began to feel like a different place altogether. The changes weren't just superficial, they ran deep, reshaping the very fabric of the school's culture. Students who had once walked the hallways in silence, heads down to avoid drawing attention, now greeted each other with smiles and warm hellos. Cliques that had been rigidly defined by popularity or interests started blending together, creating unexpected friendships and alliances. It was as if the entire school had taken a collective breath, exhaling years of tension and fear. Emily Carter, in particular, underwent a remarkable transformation. Once hesitant to speak up, she found her voice through Voices United. Encouraged by Maya and her peers, Emily decided to join the school's debate team, a move that surprised everyone, including herself. At first, she doubted whether she could hold her own against more experienced debaters, but her natural eloquence and passion quickly earned her respect. During one memorable competition, she delivered a powerful speech about resilience and overcoming adversity, leaving both judges and opponents visibly moved. By the end of the year, Emily wasn't just surviving high school, she was thriving. But it wasn't just Emily who grew stronger. Jake Miller also showed signs of change, though his journey was far less celebrated. After returning from suspension, he kept mostly to himself, avoiding the spotlight and staying clear of trouble. Some speculated that Maya's confrontation had struck a chord deep within him, forcing him to confront the person he'd become. Whether out of guilt or genuine remorse, Jake made small but noticeable efforts to turn things around. He apologized awkwardly to a few students he'd bullied. In the past, though many dismissed his words as insincere, still, others noticed a shift in his behavior. He no longer laughed at cruel jokes or joined in when his former friends picked on someone weaker. Despite these positive developments, not everything was smooth sailing. Maya continued to face criticism from certain corners of the school. While most students admired her bravery, some accused her of being too aggressive or making everything about race. These comments weighed heavily on her, especially during moments when she questioned whether she'd done the right thing. Yet, every time doubt crept in, she reminded herself of why she'd acted in the first place, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind. "They'll try to break you, sweetheart. Don't let them." To cope with the negativity, Maya leaned on her growing network of supporters. Teachers praised her leadership skills, calling her a role model for younger students. Classmates sought her advice whenever conflicts arose, trusting her judgment and fairness. Even Principal Thompson acknowledged her impact, inviting her to help draft new anti-bullying policies. Despite the challenges, Maya remained steadfast, knowing that real change often came with resistance. She refused to let anyone dim her light. By spring, the effects of Maya's actions were undeniable. The cafeteria, once a battleground of cliques and whispered gossip, became a space where students mingled freely. Art club members sat alongside athletes, sharing stories and laughter over lunch. Popular girls who once mocked quieter classmates now volunteered to mentor freshmen, offering guidance and support. Even teachers noticed the shift, commenting on how classrooms felt less tense and more collaborative. The transformation wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and misunderstanding, but it was progress. One of the most significant milestones came during Spirit Week, an annual event meant to foster school pride. In previous years, participation had been lackluster, with only a handful of students bothering to dress up or attend activities. This year, however, the energy was electric. Led by Maya and the Voices United team, students organized themed days that celebrated diversity and inclusivity. On Unity Day, everyone wore mismatched socks to symbolize embracing differences. During lunch, Maya gave a heartfelt speech about the importance of standing together, reminding everyone that their strength lay in their ability to support one another. The highlight of Spirit Week was the talent show, which drew record attendance. Emily performed a spoken word piece about finding courage in the face of adversity, earning a standing ovation from the crowd. Jake surprised everyone by joining a group performance, a skit about friendship and forgiveness. Though his acting skills were rough around the edges, the audience cheered loudly, recognizing the effort it must have taken for him to step outside his comfort zone. For the first time in years, Lincoln High felt united, not divided by fear or prejudice, but brought together by shared experiences and mutual respect. As the school year drew to a close, preparations began for the annual awards ceremony. Traditionally, this event honored academic achievements and athletic accomplishments, but this year, something new was added: the Courage Award. Nominated by their peers, recipients of this award were recognized for acts of bravery and kindness that inspired others. When Principal Thompson announced the winner, there was no surprise. It was Maya Johnson. When Maya stepped onto the stage to accept the award, the auditorium erupted into applause. Students stood on their feet, cheering and whistling as she made her way to the podium. Clutching the trophy tightly, Maya took a moment to compose herself before addressing the crowd. "This isn't just my award," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "It belongs to all of us for choosing to stand up, speak out, and support one another. Change doesn't happen because of one person. It happens because we decide to work together." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. As she spoke, Emily wiped away tears, remembering how far she'd come since that fateful day in the hallway. Jake sat quietly in the back row, reflecting on his own journey and wondering what kind of person he wanted to be moving forward. Teachers exchanged proud smiles, knowing they'd witnessed something extraordinary, a community coming together to create lasting change. The ceremony ended with a slideshow featuring photos from throughout the year. Students working side by side on projects, laughing during Spirit Week, and supporting each other at sporting events. One image stood out: a candid shot of Maya standing confidently in front of the Voices United booth, surrounded by smiling faces. Beneath the photo, a caption read, "Courage starts with one person, but it grows when we all stand together." That night, as the students of Lincoln High left the auditorium, they carried with them more than trophies or certificates. They carried hope, a belief that even in the darkest moments light could emerge, and sometimes that light came from the most unexpected places. Through their struggles and triumphs, they proved that standing up for what's right wasn't just an act of defiance. It was an act of love. Love for themselves, for their peers, and for the future they were building together. For Maya, Emily, Jake, and countless others, the journey was far from over. But as they looked ahead to the next chapter, they did so with renewed determination and faith in the power of unity. After all, they had already shown the world what was possible when people chose to rise above fear and embrace courage. Years passed, and life moved forward for the students of Lincoln High. Graduations came and went, friendships evolved, and new chapters began. Yet, the memory of that pivotal day in the cafeteria and the changes it sparked remained etched in everyone's minds. The school itself transformed over time, becoming a model for other institutions struggling with similar issues. Anti-bullying programs inspired by Voices United were adopted by neighboring schools, spreading Maya's message of courage and unity far beyond Lincoln High's walls. But the true impact of those events could only be fully understood years later, when alumni gathered for their 10-year reunion. The reunion was held in the same gymnasium where Principal Thompson had once announced stricter anti-bullying measures. Decorated with balloons, streamers, and photo displays chronicling the past decade, the space buzzed with excitement as former classmates reunited. Laughter filled the air as people hugged old friends, compared aging faces to yearbook photos, and reminisced about shared memories. Amid the joyful chaos, one topic dominated conversations. The day Maya stood up to Jake and changed everything. Emily Carter, now a successful journalist, delivered the evening's keynote speech, a role she never imagined herself playing back in high school. Standing at the podium, she scanned the crowd, her eyes landing briefly on Maya, who sat smiling proudly in the front row. Taking a deep breath, Emily began. "When I think about my time at Lincoln High, I don't remember the exams or the football games," she said, her voice steady, yet emotional. "What I remember is a moment in the hallway that felt like the lowest point of my life. And another moment in the cafeteria that gave me hope." She recounted the incident with Jake and his gang, describing how humiliated and powerless she had felt. Then her tone shifted as she spoke about Maya's intervention. "Maya didn't just stand up to Jake," Emily continued. "She stood up for all of us, for every student who had ever been bullied, ignored, or silenced. She showed us that we didn't have to accept cruelty as normal, that we could fight back, not with anger, but with courage and compassion." Her words drew murmurs of agreement from the audience. Many nodded, recalling how Maya's actions had inspired them to take a stand against injustice. Some even shared personal stories during the Q&A session afterward, crediting Maya with helping them find their own voices. One man admitted he'd left an abusive relationship because of what he learned from Voices United. A woman tearfully thanked Maya for teaching her how to advocate for marginalized co-workers in her workplace. Each story reinforced the ripple effect of that single act of defiance. A reminder that bravery often starts small, but can grow into something monumental. Jake Miller, sitting quietly near the back of the room, listened intently to Emily's speech. Now a mechanic working at his father's garage, Jake rarely attended social gatherings, let alone school reunions. But something compelled him to come tonight, to face the people whose lives he'd once tried so hard to ruin. When Emily mentioned his name, he flinched slightly, expecting boos or judgmental stares. Instead, there was silence, a respectful acknowledgement of the role he'd played in the story, however painful it might have been. After the speeches ended, Jake mustered the courage to approach Maya. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how she would react. Finally, he extended his hand and said softly, "I owe you an apology, for real this time." Maya studied him carefully, noting the sincerity in his expression. She shook his hand firmly and replied, "You don't owe me anything. Just keep doing better. That's all any of us can do." Their brief exchange became a talking point among the attendees, sparking discussions about forgiveness and redemption. Some argued that Jake deserved credit for turning his life around, while others believed apologies couldn't erase years of harm. Regardless of differing opinions, one thing was clear. Jake's transformation served as proof that people could change if they were willing to confront their mistakes and work toward growth. Meanwhile, Maya reflected on her journey since high school. After graduating, she pursued a degree in sociology, focusing on community activism and social justice. Her work took her across the country, organizing workshops, advocating for underrepresented groups, and mentoring young leaders. Despite her achievements, she remained humble, always reminding others that heroism wasn't about grand gestures, it was about showing up consistently, even when it was hard. At the reunion, she encouraged her former classmates to continue fighting for equality and kindness in their respective fields. Change doesn't end with high school, she told them. It evolves, and it's our responsibility to carry it forward. As the night wore on, the atmosphere grew lighter. Old rivalries dissolved as people laughed over embarrassing prom photos and debated which teacher had been the toughest. Yet beneath the surface, a deeper connection lingered, an understanding that they had all been part of something bigger than themselves. They had witnessed the power of standing up for what's right, even when it meant challenging deeply ingrained norms. And they had seen firsthand how one person's courage could inspire a community to rise above its flaws. Before leaving, several alumni stopped by the photo display to take pictures with a particular image. The candid shot of Maya standing confidently in front of the Voices United booth, surrounded by smiling faces. Beneath it, someone had added a new caption. Courage starts with one, but it grows when we all choose to stand together. Driving home later that night, Maya thought about the evening's events. She felt proud, not just of what she had accomplished, but of how far everyone else had come. Emily's success, Jake's redemption, and the countless untold stories of resilience proved that their efforts hadn't been in vain. Change was messy, imperfect, and ongoing, but it was worth it. In the years that followed, Lincoln High continued to honor its legacy of courage and unity. New generations of students carried the torch, building on the foundation laid by Maya and her peers. Annual events like Unity Day became cherished traditions, reminding everyone of the importance of empathy and inclusion. Teachers incorporated lessons about social justice into their curricula, ensuring that future students understood the value of standing up for one another. For Maya, Emily, Jake, and the rest of their classmates, the reunion marked not just the end of an era, but the beginning of another chapter. Life had taken them down different paths, but they remained connected by the shared belief that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. And sometimes that light came from the most unexpected places, from a girl in a wheelchair finding her voice, from a bully learning to apologize, and from a brave newcomer refusing to stay silent. Through their struggles and triumphs, they proved that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about choosing to act despite fear. It was about believing in the possibility of a better world and working tirelessly to create it. As they looked ahead to the future, they did so with renewed determination and faith in the power of unity. After all, they had already shown the world what was possible when people chose to rise above fear and embrace courage. As the years rolled on, the legacy of Lincoln High's transformation continued to inspire not only its alumni, but also communities far beyond the small town where it all began. Maya Johnson, now in her early 30s, had become a household name in social justice circles. Her tireless advocacy for marginalized groups and her work mentoring young leaders earned her recognition across the country. She traveled extensively, speaking at conferences, leading workshops, and collaborating with organizations dedicated to creating safer, more inclusive environments in schools and workplaces. Yet, despite her growing fame, Maya remained grounded, always crediting her journey back to that single moment of defiance in the cafeteria. Emily Carter, too, had carved out an impressive career for herself. As a journalist, she specialized in stories about resilience and human connection, often highlighting individuals who overcame adversity to make a difference in their communities. Her articles were widely read and praised for their authenticity and depth. In one particularly moving piece, she revisited her own experience at Lincoln High, reflecting on how Maya's courage had changed her life. "Before that day, I thought my wheelchair defined me," Emily wrote. "But Maya showed me and everyone else that our strength lies not in what we can or cannot do, but in how we choose to respond to the world around us." Jake Miller's story took a quieter path, yet it was no less significant. After high school, he struggled to find his footing, haunted by guilt over his past actions. For years he worked odd jobs, keeping mostly to himself and avoiding attention. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to rebuild his life. Inspired by the changes he'd witnessed at Lincoln High, Jake started volunteering at youth centers, mentoring kids who reminded him of his younger self. He spoke candidly about his mistakes, using his experiences as a cautionary tale to warn others against following in his footsteps. By the time of the reunion, Jake had found a sense of purpose, one rooted in redemption and service. The ripple effects of their collective efforts extended far beyond individual lives. Schools nationwide adopted anti-bullying programs modeled after Voices United, incorporating lessons on empathy, conflict resolution, and allyship into their curricula. Teachers and administrators credited Maya and her peers with sparking a movement that challenged outdated notions of power dynamics in educational settings. Parents shared stories of their children standing up to bullies or reaching out to classmates in need, inspired by the example set by Lincoln High's class of 2013. Even the town itself underwent a transformation. Once known primarily for its quiet streets and sleepy charm, it became a symbol of hope and progress. Community events celebrating diversity and inclusion drew visitors from neighboring towns, fostering connections that strengthened the region as a whole. Local businesses partnered with schools to provide resources for underprivileged students, while volunteer-led initiatives addressed issues like homelessness and food insecurity. The spirit of unity that had taken root at Lincoln High blossomed into something much larger, a testament to the enduring power of collective action. For Maya, the most rewarding aspect of her journey wasn't the accolades or media coverage. It was seeing how her message resonated with people from all walks of life. During one workshop in a bustling city auditorium, a teenage girl approached her after the session ended. Tears streamed down the girl's face as she recounted her own struggles with bullying and isolation. "I didn't think anyone would care," she admitted. "But hearing your story made me realize I'm not alone." Maya hugged her tightly, reminding her that courage wasn't about facing challenges alone. It was about finding strength in community. That sentiment echoed throughout Maya's work. Whether addressing hundreds of people at a conference or chatting privately with a struggling student, she emphasized the importance of solidarity. "Change doesn't happen because of one person," she often said. "It happens because we decide to stand together, even when it's hard." Those words became a mantra for countless individuals seeking to create positive change in their own lives and communities. Back in her hometown, Maya returned periodically to visit Lincoln High. Each trip filled her with pride as she saw firsthand the lasting impact of their efforts. The hallways buzzed with energy, alive with laughter and conversation. Students greeted each other warmly, regardless of background or clique. Bulletin boards displayed artwork and essays celebrating themes of kindness and acceptance. Even the cafeteria felt different, no longer a battleground of cliques but a vibrant space where friendships flourished. During one visit, Maya stopped by the library, where a group of students gathered around a table, brainstorming ideas for a new initiative called Unity Leaders. They explained that the program aimed to train students to mediate conflicts, support victims of bullying, and promote inclusivity within the school. One boy shyly handed Maya a flyer featuring a quote attributed to her. "Courage starts with one, but it grows when we all choose to stand together." Overwhelmed with emotion, Maya thanked them, promising to stay involved however she could. As the sun set over the familiar rooftops of her childhood home, Maya reflected on how far they had come since that fateful day in the cafeteria. What began as a single act of defiance had grown into a movement that transcended generations. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges to overcome, prejudices to dismantle, and injustices to address. But progress, she reminded herself, was rarely linear. It was messy, unpredictable, and ongoing. In the end, the story of Lincoln High wasn't just about Maya, Emily, or Jake. It was about a community coming together to confront its flaws and build something stronger in their place. It was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, not because they sought recognition, but because they believed in the possibility of a better world. And it was about the enduring truth that even in the darkest moments, light could emerge. Sometimes that light came from the most unexpected places. From a girl in a wheelchair finding her voice, from a bully learning to apologize, and from a brave newcomer refusing to stay silent. Years later, when historians looked back on this chapter of Lincoln High's history, they wouldn't focus solely on the events themselves. Instead, they would highlight the lessons learned, the idea that courage isn't about being fearless, but about choosing to act despite fear. That unity isn't about erasing differences, but about embracing them. And that change, though difficult, is always possible when people come together with a shared vision of hope. For Maya, Emily, Jake, and everyone else touched by that pivotal moment, the journey never truly ended. Life continued to present challenges, requiring constant effort and vigilance. But armed with the knowledge that they had already achieved so much, they faced the future with confidence. After all, they had already shown the world what was possible when people chose to rise above fear and embrace courage. Together, they proved that the smallest acts of bravery could spark the greatest transformations.